And here we are live on what day is this? Wednesday morning. Talking about an article that comes out of the University of Bonn, B-O-N-N, about stress. Do you have stress in your life? Do you wake up and watch the news, and are you stressed out about that, or finances, or inflation, or all the above? We're going to talk about it. The information you hear on Health Talk with Dr. Len is intended to be strictly educational and is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease. Any medical decision should be made between you and your healthcare professional. And now, here is Dr. Len. Yes, stress every day, all the time. And this article says it can actually damage your brain. So we got to get this information out. It's important. The number to reach us off air, 888-231-5325. Chronically stressed people, which I think is about 90% of us now, often show abnormalities in their motor skills, such as poor fine motor control. However, how these symptoms occur is hardly been studied. They go on to say, we investigated this question in our study, explains Professor Valentin Stein from the Institute of Physiology, University of Bonn. The researchers used mice as experimental animals, some of which they exposed to a stressful situation for a few days. Meanwhile, they used a special microscopy method to take pictures of their brains. They focused on parts of the cerebral cortex responsible for motor control and learning new movements. With our method, it was possible to observe one and the same neuron at different points in time, says Dr. Ann Gellner, a physician there. We can therefore see whether and how it changes as a result of stress. Stress seems to have a negative effect on the learning of these movements. This is the conclusion of this study at the University of Bonn. According to the study, the neurons lose some of their contacts with other neurons after stress. I like to use the analogy of the way the brain communicates with the body is through multitudes of extension cords that aren't plugged in together, not male to female, nowhere along the line. And those gaps in those extension cords have to be filled by something for that neuron to move. Those are typically what we call our neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, GABA. And they allow that nerve transaction to go so that the body can be controlled by the brain. So when we have movement issues, twitching, focus, wobbly walk, inability to concentrate, stress seems to cause problems. But the real problem that this article points out is these results were useful for earlier diagnosis and improved therapy of stress-related diseases such as depression. They can also document that stress leaves, listen to this, traces in the brain, possibly permanent ones. The study appeared in the journal called Translational Psychiatry. The researchers came upon a conspicuous feature. After a stressful situation, the neurons studied lost some of their synapses. These are those ends where they actually store these neurotransmitters. These are the contacts to other nerve cells. During learning processes, new synapses are usually formed or existing ones are strengthened. Instead, the stressed rodents lost up to 15% of their contacts. Doesn't sound like a bunch. But that could be eye twitching, facial twitching, arm twitching. It could be any of those. At the same time, the animals develop motor learning deficits. For example, they had to try to grasp a food pellet with one paw and transport it into their mouths. So they were missing the mark. In the wild, mice use both paws to do this, so they had to relearn this skill. What about with us? What have we learned as infants that if we're put under a totally stressful situation, we can unlearn? The non-stress control group received a success rate of 30% after 5 days. The stressed animals, however, only managed to take the food every 10th attempt. Mice vary in their sensitivity to stress, as do we as humans. Some of them hardly developed any abnormalities after a few days of stress. They're considered resilient. Surprisingly, these robust animals had similar difficulties as their more sensitive peers in learning to grasp with one hand. It's therefore possible that motor tests are very suitable for detecting stress-related disorders such as depression before other symptoms become apparent. So before we throw an SSRI at somebody, especially a child that may have gone through some stressful situations, do we check out their fine motor skills first? The researchers also have clues as to what triggers the loss of the synapses. Certain immune cells, the microglia, were activated in the brain. These belong to the so-called phagocytes, which can, for example, digest pathogens and defective cells. It's possible they're switched on by stress and they attack these contact points. The research group also examined the fluid that washes around the brain and spinal cord. They found certain proteins that can normally be detected there in neurodegenerative diseases such as Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. We therefore believe that stress-related psychiatric diseases such as depression are also associated with the degradation of these neurons. Accordingly, long-term stress, to which children are increasingly exposed, can potentially cause serious damage to the brain. The Department of Psychiatry and Psychotherapy at the University of the Hospital of Bonn sponsored this article. So, what do? I suggest we do neurotransmitter testing. You start there. I have 2 of those coming up today. They call it an HPA Complete by Sinesco Labs. If you want more information on those, call our toll-free at 888-231-5325. It's the best way to track down specifically what's going on in your system, your body, maybe your child's, husband, spouse, whatever. Call and set up a consult time and we can go after that. There's also a number of great supplements that can be used. One of those includes CBD. So we'll be back again tomorrow with more news on this podcast. God bless you, folks. Please share this with others. See you tomorrow.